Big-time urban railroading was the environment for the 1988 National Railway Historical Society's annual convention. Held in Somerset, New Jersey, near New York City, it attracted some 2,400 fans. Many of them stayed at the three headquarters hotels near Bound Brook, New Jersey, where most of the excursions began and ended. The main excursions were powered by the popular nickel-plate Berkshire number 765 and 3 Alco Centuries from the Morristown and Erie Short Line. The nickel-plate steamer is owned by the Fort Wayne Railroad Historical Society. This was the first time the locomotive had been to the eastern seaboard, so the fans were out in force for these trips. The M&E Alco Centuries have their fans as well. One of them is Mike Delvecchio of Railfan magazine.
Morristown and Erie is a relatively small short line, today about 13.5 miles. And we're incorporated, middle late 1800s, and Ben Freeland bought the line in 1980, 81, and it's been operating ever since. He brought the line out of bankruptcy, and he's operating at a profit now. All right, two of them, the two end units, M&E 16 and 17 are Alco C430s. They were purchased for Conrail, the former New York Central units. They're 3,000 horsepower. The Alco Century design. The center unit is a Century 424. That was purchased in the TP&W after the Santa Fe had bought the line. And he has another Century 424 from the TP&W, which will soon be painted and look like the other three.
On Saturday, July 23rd, the 3 Alcos handled the trip to Conrail's massive Selkirk Yard near Albany, New York. The trip began on the busy commuter tracks of NJ Transit. The Alcos later moved onto the West Shore route along the Hudson River. This is former New York Central trackage and an important freight line for Conrail. After a tour of the Selkirk yards and shops, the excursion was ready to leave. The aged Alcos had to fight for attention because of all the modern Conrail power here. This former New York West Shore and Buffalo Railway freight station in Saugerties, New York, is still standing after over 100 years. The NYWS&B was taken over by the New York Central in 1885. Now the depot houses a fuel company. Late that evening, the Alcos returned to Cranford, New Jersey, once again back on NJ Transit trackage. The passengers who got off here had a chance to see some of that famous Alco smoke before the train ended its run at Bound Brook. The next day, Sunday, July 24th, was another warm day. Temperatures in the mid to upper 90s were expected, but the heat didn't keep the lovers of steam at home. Fans and the just plain curious came to Bound Brook to see nickel plate number 765 on its first trip to this part of the country, and they were not disappointed. The old girl may have been built by the Lima Locomotive Works in 1944, but she was here to show them she could still handle a passenger train as well as she did during World War II. Today's excursion to the Blue Mountain in Reading and Temple, Pennsylvania, was delayed 1 hour and 15 minutes because the cars needed additional water for the air conditioning to work properly on such a hot day. It may have been warm on the train, but the fans outside didn't mind the wait. Bob Keller, Jerry Wallace, and Tom Stevens used the delay to make sure everything was ready for the long day ahead. When the train was watered, engineer Rich Melvin and fireman Larry Randolph pulled ahead out of Bound Brook. At Weston, the line to Temple runs through an old Reading yard. The trip then continued on former Reading track through Philadelphia. On the west side of Philadelphia, the line runs through the heavy industrial areas of Bridgeport and Conshohocken. This stone depot in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, was built by the Reading in 1926. For years, it was neglected until the city bought it. Now it's owned by Train Station Associates and houses 2 local businesses. Upon arrival in Temple, the 765 had regained 1 hour that it lost because of the late departure. Temple is the home of the Blue Mountain and Reading tourist line. The stop here allowed the conventioneers the chance to sample the road's vintage steam locomotives. The 425 was built by Baldwin in 1928. It's a former Gulf, Mobile, and Northern 462. The 2102 was built in 1945 for the Reading. It's a Class T1 484 and a sister of the Freedom Train engine, number 2101, that was seriously damaged in a 1979 roundhouse fire. 2102 was just repainted in Reading black with Blue Mountain and Reading on the tender. The fans got a chance to ride behind the 2102 on the 26-mile run between Temple and Hamburg, Pennsylvania. The train always runs tender first to Hamburg because the line has no turning facility. At Hamburg, the 2102 gets serviced, while the line's Jeep 30 waits to move to the platform with the 2102's cars. Then the 2102 pulls ahead to the platform. She couples to her train for the run back to Temple. The 2102 arrives back at Temple in time for the riders to board the 765. The crossing from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania to Phillipsburg, New Jersey is over the Delaware River. This pin-connected bridge from the early part of this century will soon be replaced by a modern structure. This fun-filled day ends with a late evening arrival in Bound Brook. The next trip for the 765 was Saturday, July 30th from Hoboken, New Jersey to Port Jervis, New York, over former Erie Main Line. This line is now owned by Conrail but dispatched by NJ Transit because it runs so many commuter trains on the line. The NJT shops and engine terminal are located here at Hoboken. The Lackawanna Terminal in Hoboken was built in 1907 and is undergoing restoration. These shuttle buses became very familiar to the convention goers. They transported them to all the excursions. West End Tower protects the junction here where the line emerges from Bergen Tunnel under the Palisades. After a photo run-by on a remote piece of track, the 765 slows at Arden Station, then backs up to board her passengers. The brick depot here in Port Jervis, New York, was once owned by the Erie. It's been abandoned for over 10 years. The city hopes to interest a restaurant in taking over part of the building, with the rest of the space given over to a museum or possibly the police department. At one time, the Erie had a large yard, an engine terminal, and a roundhouse at Port Jervis. Now a small commuter station serves NJ Transit commuters. After a break for lunch, the trip resumed with the M&E Alco Centuries. There's no turning facility here, and the 765 had to go 30 miles to the nearest Y at Kemble Hull. So to avoid that delay, the Alcos would take the train back to Hoboken. The crew stopped to throw a switch before the train could leave Port Jervis. Due to signal problems, the Alcos were running slowly on a stop and proceed signal. The signal trouble continued through Middletown, New York. NJ Transit crosses under Interstate 84 near Crystal Run, New York, then continues back to Hoboken. Sunday, July 31st, was another hot day. Today's trip was scheduled to run from Bound Brook through Temple, Pennsylvania, then to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and return. All plans are subject to change, however. A minor communications breakdown among the locomotive crew, Conrail, and the convention organizers caused a delay in watering the air conditioning in the cars. This delayed the start of the trip, and even then, some cars were without water. Nevertheless, the 765's departure was as exhilarating as ever. By the time the train had reached Temple, the Harrisburg part of the trip had been scratched. The train would leave Temple and return to Bound Brook because it was now too far behind schedule. This change meant that the 765 would be serviced in Temple, and some way to turn the locomotive had to be found quickly. In the meantime, the 765 had to keep out of the way of the Blue Mountain and Redding's regular excursion traffic. The 425 is just returning from Hamburg. The Conrail main line next to the BM&R's track sees a lot of traffic. The 425 heads to Hamburg with another of her regular excursion consists. Then, with the line clear and its passenger cars safely stored, the 765 approaches the coaling dock. As the servicing of 765 nears completion, her cars are pushed to the main by the Blue Mountain and Redding's ancient switcher, an EMD NW2. Then the 765 heads toward the Y in Redding before returning to Bound Brook via Allentown, Pennsylvania. With the night arrival at Bound Brook, the 1988 NRHS convention becomes history. The final excursion is over, and smoke around Gotham fades from the Jersey skyline. Someday the 765 may make another appearance in the East. Until then, the fans here will endure the rarity of mainline steam trips.